This week on Head to Head, will Emperor Palpatine appear in Episode 9?
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vancil.
And I'm Darryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. So, Darryl, let's get right into the Cantina.
Cool, let's go.
Let's just get a drink and start talking about it. Because the reason why I want to get into it is we have a couple of really cool things that I want to talk about today. The first one is Star Wars Resistance has debuted.
Yeah.
Now, here's the funny thing. Neither one of us have seen an episode of this show yet.
Not at all. Even though I've been laid up.
I know, you've been laid up. And I don't know why, but it actually, the debut of it, even though I've known about it for a while, actually snuck up on me. And it was when I was watching other people's reactions to it that I was like, oh yeah, that's right, this thing came out.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing though, even though I set my DVR, so I should be able to catch up by next week's podcast. At first I almost was going to dismiss this one. I almost wasn't going to watch it.
Okay.
And that's mostly because it was supposed to be geared towards kids.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've actually heard some people's reactions, even though it is geared towards kids and everything, apparently it's almost kind of like how Rebels was. It's not quite as geared towards kids as what a lot of people originally thought. There are some themes that they tackle. Like, for instance, I heard there was this guy who was like a war vet, and they deal a little bit, with the trauma that he's gone through. And
okay.
There's some really cool things about it. Of course, some old favorites pop up. Poe Dameron, BB-8.
Yeah, I heard Poe Dameron is there, and Oscar Isaac, of course, is doing the voice, which is cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I think that's cool. But then also, there's this whole situation where they send this kid to kind of be a spy into the whole First Order thing, and he's also allegedly supposed to be like the best pilot, so he's constantly having to prove himself, and so I'm sure that Poe Dameron kind of sees him and is probably going to take him under his wing, no pun intended.
Well, the thing that I'm curious about, because if you remember way back to the Clone Wars, I remember you and I saw the movie, and they actually had a couple of the, characters from the movies in that. One of them was Dooku, and they actually had Christopher Lee doing the voice of Dooku, but only for that theatrical first episode. When the series hit, they had somebody else doing the voice. So what I'm curious about is I wonder if Oscar Isaac is going to continue to voice Poe Dameron throughout the series.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that Poe is probably not going to be there all the time. He's going to be kind of probably like how Leia was in Rebels, where she would pop up every now and again.
Yeah.
So maybe those episodes he might come back and do the voice, in between his other movies that he's got going on. But I don't think he's probably going to be the focal point of this, but he probably, just peek his head in or so.
Honestly, I hope so, because one of the things that I always thought was cool was when they actually have the actors from the movies, if they're going to feature their characters in a TV series, particularly animated series, I always liked it when they actually did the voice. Like, for instance, I thought it was great that Billy D. Williams actually did Lando's voice in Rebels.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that was cool, and I think that brings a extra bit of polish to the show, and it's actually kind of like, okay, it's still that connective tissue, that connective
there's more
thread.
credibility.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, this is no disrespect to the wonderful voice actors who have taken over. Like, for instance, even though the names basically escape me, but the guy that voices Anakin Skywalker, I think he does a great job. Same thing with Obi-Wan. I mean, you actually forget that those aren't the guys from the movies.
Yeah.
Because the Obi-Wan guy almost sounds like Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, especially when he does the old Obi-Wan, man, that's just amazing.
Well, there was a different guy for that one.
Exactly, but he sounds exactly like Alec Guinness, man.
Yeah,
I was just like, wow.
It's frightening,
it's
actually.
Creepy.
Yeah, it's just like, you realize that, man, they could really do an animated series. And, and then, of course, you get guys like Sam Witwer, who, he ended up doing Darth Maul, and he actually did the voice of Darth Maul even in Solo.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that. Then I believe he also does the Emperor.
Yep, he does. Yeah,
Palpatine's
he does
voice
Palpatine
too.
as well. Yep.
And I mean, it just shows you like how talented these guys are. And let's not forget that Mark Hamill actually made a whole career
You're doing voice acting, yeah.
Doing voice acting.
Of course, my favorite, the Joker.
Of course. You know, and it's always interesting to see how they actually approach the character, because obviously you want to respect everybody that, you know, you want to respect the actor who portrayed him in the movie.
Right.
But you also want to put a little bit of your own spin on that.
Definitely. So, yeah, I think The Resistance is going to be an interesting show, just like we thought Rebels was. And I think...
Oh, we'll definitely revisit this topic. I mean, once we both actually had a chance to catch up with it, you know, I think that there's going to be a lot to discuss based on everything I've been hearing. Now, let me just quickly get your thoughts on the animation style, because we both seen the trailer for it.
Mm-hmm. I think the animation style is a little bit... I'm glad they didn't go with the original one that they had. They went with a more... Although I did like the one from Clone Wars. I thought that was, to me, that's the best animation.
Yeah.
Rebels was good.
Yeah, and Rebels is essentially the same. I mean, that's that whole 3D animation style. This is more of a 2D animation style.
Yeah, this is kind of like the old Japanese.
Yeah, like your anime kind of like Robotech or something like that.
Right. So I think that's one of the things that could be interesting. Like I said, I just have to see how it all plays out. I think from the trailer, it looks cool.
Yeah, I actually like it.
From the trailer, it looks awesome. So, like I said, I'm willing to give it a shot and see what comes of it, and especially with the different directors that they have, which we'll be talking about momentarily. You know, I think they'll bring everything to life, and so you may not even pay it that much attention.
That's true.
If it is bad, but I don't think so.
Let's go into the next one. So now we're going to switch gears. So we're going to go from the animated series, the brand new animated series, Resistance. Now we're going to go to the upcoming live-action TV series, The Mandalorian.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to have and I'm curious to see what type of flair because each director brings something, of course, different. I think that's the objective of it. So I know we have Dave Filoni.
Yeah, and let's start there. We got Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni, this is key for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, he's directing the pilot episode.
Mm-hmm.
That speaks volumes to me because remember, one of the things that a lot of us Star Wars fans have all talked about is we would like to see Dave Filoni get his own Star Wars film.
Yeah.
Why hasn't he been? Because everybody forgets that Filoni studied directly under George Lucas.
Yep. When
he was doing the Clone Wars, he worked with Lucas on them. He talked to him, and he just has this encyclopedic knowledge of Star Wars, and he really cares about the franchise.
Absolutely.
So for that reason, it would be really interesting to see him do an actual live-action film.
Yeah, and he's done so well with the Clone Wars and then all the other, like, Rebel. I mean, he's just done such a great job telling these stories. And so now to actually get his hand on some live action, you know, hopefully we can actually see, like, a full movie with him at the helm.
Is, and we've always speculated that they would probably let him direct one episode, and that would be testing the waters and everything. But here's the thing that I find interesting about that is the fact that he's directing the pilot, which means they must have a lot of faith in his ability.
Yeah.
Because this is setting the tone for the whole series. This is going to be the first thing that people see it. It's going to decide whether or not people watch it or not.
Absolutely. But I think he has the chops for it. I think he has. And the thing about Filoni is that he loves Star Wars. So it's not just like a director who's like, oh, Star Wars is cool. I love Star Wars. You know, but Filoni like really eats and breathes Star Wars.
He's one of us.
Yeah. So he's read the books. He's into the comics. He's heavily involved with Kathleen Kennedy. So, I mean, I think that he's a part of it. And I think he's really in that brain trust that they talk about with Disney, with Bob Iger, as far as where they're going to take the Star Wars franchise. So I'm sure he's probably had those conversations even with JJ and Ryan and all those different directors. So I think with that, you know, he's well qualified. So I think he's going to knock it out the park.
Yeah, and like you said, he's a great storyteller. I think he's going to establish a really good tone that a lot of these other directors are going to be able to follow. It's going to be a good roadmap. So who else do we have directing this? They announced a lot of really good directors for this. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and one of them is Ron Howard's daughter. So that's one that I'm really curious about, because one is what's also cool about it is that it's another woman in the Star Wars franchise directing something. But I think that with it being Ron Howard's daughter, and after he's done Solo, I'm just curious to see what she's going to bring to the show as well.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, it's nice to see another presence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the fact that she's also an actress,
yeah,
I think helps too. I think when directors come from the background of acting, I think that it makes them a lot better directors because they understand how to communicate with actors better. That's not to say, I mean, listen, there's a lot of directors that have never acted that are amazing, but you know, it just, I think it helps. So I'm really curious. Yeah, and especially since her father has now done a Star Wars film. It's going to be interesting to see now what she brings to the table.
Yeah, and going to that point, it's kind of like what you've always taught me, like, you know, being an editor helps you be a better videographer because now you understand both sides of the coin. So I think that's what's going to add to that is the fact that she has the acting background. And so she'll be able to relate and to convey her vision to the people who are going to, you know, bring everything to life on the screen. So, and like I said, there's tons of other directors, I'm sure.
Yeah, they've announced other great directors. So it looks like they're actually taking this, you know, really serious. Because I honestly think that now that they're slowing down the movies, I think that what's really going to push Star Wars into another level is TV.
Yeah.
I think this TV series is going to do it.
Yeah, people have been getting really into series lately. Like, I think that's the big thing because everybody's talking about, oh, have you seen the series on Netflix? And it's like so many series. So I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Disney is trying to creating their own.
They got their streaming service.
Own streaming service.
Now, the thing that's interesting about their streaming service is that, and I don't know if an actual date has honestly been announced for it. I mean, we think that it's debuting in October of 19. And that would make sense because, or it might be like August of 19 or something, and then the series is doing October or something like that. But it's going to be around when Episode 9 hits, which is a good idea. And this is going to be one of the primary ways in which they launch the series, even though it's all speculation because on one hand, they're saying the Mandalorian series will come out around that time. And on the other hand, we got the Clone Wars. Let's not forget the Clone Wars is coming back.
Yep.
So they've been a little bit sketchy about announcing when this streaming service is coming out. But, I mean, I can say that they're definitely they're going to use Marvel and Star Wars to basically launch it because they got a Loki series coming out. They got a Scarlet Witch series coming out. So they're really heavily banking on these properties that they have in order to launch this streaming service. And then, of course, you know, Disney has just a mountain.
Yeah.
And then, of course, them, you know, they were trying to acquire Fox. And I think they're really trying to shore up this streaming service they have. And the Mandalorian TV series certainly is going to be a key component of not just launching Star Wars again, and hopefully bringing it back into the good graces of all the fans. But also, yeah, like you said, they're going to really heavily use The Mandalorian to launch this new streaming service.
Now, what do you think? Where do you think they're going to debut The Mandalorian? Like, do you think it's going to be on regular cable? Do you think it's going to
No, it's going to be on the streaming service. They've announced that.
Do you think it's going to be on that alone?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I do think they're going to do, somebody brought this up. So you had the Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones basically is on I think it's an HBO show.
HBO, yeah. Game of Thrones, yeah.
I couldn't remember which one it was. So it's an HBO show, but what they did was they actually took a couple of episodes and they put them in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given that The Mandalorian is going to have essentially a theatrical budget for every episode, I think that you're going to see some Mandalorian episodes in the theater.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to market it, you know, or to push it. It's almost like they did with the original Clone Wars before the TV show came out, they did the release in the feature movie in the theaters that we saw, and then
honestly, that's what I hope happens.
Yeah,
I really hope that what ends up happening is that, you know, they do like a 2-hour first episode, and that they put it in the theater. And if that's the case, that means technically Dave Filoni will have directed his first Star Wars film.
Yeah,
you know, and if they do that, I think that that would actually be a smart move to bring a wider audience to at least know that this thing is out. Because, again, you know, us being Star Wars fans, we consume all this stuff. We know, even the stuff that we don't know. Like, we have never seen an episode of Resistance, but we knew it was coming.
Right.
You know, and we're going to watch it now. But there's a lot of people out there that are more casual fans. They don't even know this stuff is coming out. So I think one way to make everybody aware of it is to go, hey, look, let's put it in the theater and, you know, promote it to death. And then hopefully it's like, oh, you liked what you saw? They, you know, we mentioned in our last podcast about Cobra Kai. That's what they did with Cobra Kai. They actually re-released the original Karate Kid. Then they put 2 episodes of Cobra Kai after it. And, you know, that's on YouTube. Well, it's called YouTube Premium now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that did.
So, you know, and hopefully that, you know, it gets you to subscribe so you actually see the rest of it. So, yeah, I think that that's something that they're definitely going to do. So technically, it is only going to be on the streaming service, but it might find its way into a theater.
Well, speaking of theaters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got to talk about the shooting locations for Episode 9. They've also released some of that.
Yeah, so they're apparently shooting in Jordan. They're shooting in China. They're shooting in Italy. And, of course, good old faithful, the UK at Pinewood Studios. So, from what I've heard...
Even California, I've heard they're shooting some.
Oh, sweet. So, I think we're definitely going to get... well, from what I've heard we're going to get Mustafar again.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I've heard we're getting Mustafar. I heard Kylo's going to go to Mustafar and try to find out some relics or explore Vader's old palace. So that's one of the locations that I've heard that they're definitely thinking about.
I'm also thinking possibly Jakku.
Jakku, yep, that's another one.
You know, and just keep in mind, you know, for anybody that is listening to this that might be a casual fan, a lot of people wonder sometimes, well, who cares about where they're shooting this stuff? I mean, you know, what possible, I mean, really, are you guys this crazy that you even care where they're shooting this stuff? But we have
Yes, we are. The short answer to that question, yes.
The short answer is yes, actually, we are that nuts. But and the thing that you have to understand is one of the reasons why us more hardcore Star Wars fans actually care about seemingly trivial things like this is because it really does give you a hint as to what planets or what environments could be in the movie. Yeah,
where they're going, or if they've shot there before, we like, oh, okay, we know that, you know, in let's say episode 3, they shot here, and that was where Mustafar was supposed to be. So they're shooting there again. It's like, oh, okay, we might be going back there for a reason, and it makes sense. You kind of try to glean as much information out of these different places and just trying to figure out,
I'll give
this
you
is what we're doing.
A good example is that there's a leaked photo that showed the Millennium Falcon in a jungle environment.
Mm-hmm.
So now people are speculating, are they going back to Endor? Are they going to Kashyyyk? Where are they going?
Well, it could be back to where Maz was, because that was kind of a foresty little area.
Yeah, that's true. That did actually. You're right. That did have a foresty. But
then again, you could kind of make the argument, why would they go back? Because that was kind of destroyed.
Well, I mean, the
Force Awakens. So,
well, and here's the thing. I think that I think it is most likely that it will be either Endor or Kashyyyk, but you could see Endor only because if JJ really is trying to tie all the movies together with Episode 9.
Or Kashyyyk, like I said, because that's still another one from the prequels, because he said he wanted to tie the prequels in too. So you could make
Chewbacca's homeworld. Yep. It would make sense that he would feel, now that Han's gone, maybe he would want to return. They do deal with Kashyyyk quite heavily in the Aftermath trilogy.
Or it could be, and that could be a good place for a base.
Yeah. Actually, that's something I never really thought of, but...
Yeah, I mean, the Resistance is looking for places, to kind of establish their own bases and things of that nature, so...
I mean, it might be obvious, but, why not?
Yeah. I mean, I already had, as Yoda said, they had great relations with the Wookiees, so... Maybe that, that goodwill still is open to them.
That could be. Well, I mean, the thing is that, and this is true in New Canon too, because again, particularly in the second Aftermath novel, Life Debt, they really talk about Kashyyyk and, of course, the life debt that we all know that Chewbacca had. Because both in the expanded universe, now Legends, and the New Canon, the Empire basically enslaved the Wookiees. And so Chewbacca has always been torn because it's like he's wanted to go back and free them or help free them. And then in Life Debt, they sort of go back to that where Han agrees to go help him. But it does play, of course, into the bigger plot. Now, how that would work after the fall of the Empire, because Aftermath, I'm trying to think of how many years after Return of the Jedi that takes place. So they might not... It just depends on where Aftermath takes place, even in the new trilogy. I mean, it takes place, I believe, right... I think it's about 6 or 8 years or something before Force Awakens. I mean, obviously it's taking place before because right. Han Solo's still alive.
Of course.
But it's just funny because, the more that they play with these timelines,
yep,
they have to start being really careful of the continuity. And so it is going to be interesting to see where they actually hold their bases, because now you only have the Resistance. You don't have the New Republic at this point.
Right.
So I'm really wondering exactly what they're going to do and where they're going to shoot. So these are the reasons why we really care deeply about these shooting locations and why they're big news to people.
Absolutely. Well, let's go to our next segment.
Oh, so we're done with our drinks?
Yes, we're done with the drinks because no drinking and flying. So we're going to go to Duel of the Fates. In today's Duel of Fates, we have who was more powerful, Yoda or Master Mace Windu?
Well, considering it's like, Master Mace Windu, Yoda. It's easy.
Yeah, it is easy. I mean,
it's easy. He's a Grandmaster. He's the only Grandmaster during that time period. I mean, Mace was never a Grandmaster.
Exactly. And plus, I mean, just by default, just by ranking, I mean, just look at it. Like, if that were the case, then Mace would have been the head of the council, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just...
This is based... This Duel of the Fates question was actually based off something, because it was intriguing to me, because it was one of the questions that, one of the questions on Quora that I get a lot. People have actually started writing me there because I've started to answer a bunch of questions on that site, Quora.com, Quaro.com, or Quora, I can't spell today, .com. They, one of the interests that I put in there was Star Wars, and of course, the whole site is based on asking questions, so I started getting more, and the more Star Wars questions I answered, the more I've gotten, and now it's gotten to the point where I get quite a bit. And I remember somebody posed that question, and I thought, that would be a good Duel of the Fates topic.
Right.
Because it comes up a lot, because you see the aggression that Mace has and how powerful he is, and somebody pointed out, they were wrong, of course, but they basically were saying that, oh yeah, but Mace actually had defeated Palpatine and Yoda lost to Palpatine. But I pointed out on there, he didn't really lose. Palpatine was playing a role.
Well, I mean, I go back and forth with that. I mean, I honestly think that Palpatine did lose, but I think he took the opportunity. Once he saw that, okay, Anakin was there, he was like, okay, I can use this to my advantage. Because I think that Palpatine is that cunning, because if you do recall, Mace did channel the dark side, and he did use that kind of to his advantage against Palpatine.
Okay,
however,
now we're getting into the duel of fates.
Yes, however, Yoda losing to Palpatine, the only reason why you can say Yoda lost to Palpatine, not necessarily. He lost to the Empire because he lost by numbers, because when it was just he and Palpatine, he was doing all right for the most part. It wasn't until those stormtroopers showed up and it's like, okay, I can't fight this guy and deal with all these stormtroopers too.
That's true. A lot of people forget about the fact that the stormtroopers came in and it was like, and I think
he was already tired.
Well, and you and I have talked about this before too. If that fight had been just on solid ground, that might have been different, but you have stormtroopers shooting at him. You have like Palpatine, who had the high ground.
Yeah, chucking
chucking stuff. Yeah, Senate pods at him. You know, it's going to be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, you have to focus, especially when dealing with somebody as powerful as Palpatine. You have to focus all of your energy and might towards that. And then on top of that, you've got like about 50 or 60 stormtroopers waiting to blast you, so you can't deflect everything. So he had to
and Yoda,
he had to take the high ground because he knew he was better.
Yeah,
he was better served alive versus trying to be this great hero and trying to destroy everything. But it does make you wonder, like, how powerful is Yoda really?
Well, because I'll tell you, that's the point I was about to make. You know, I mean, he was throwing Palpatine around like a rag doll at one point.
Right.
Mace wasn't going to do that. In fact, the only time that Palpatine really started to truly lose to Mace was when he saw Anakin get in there, and he knew, okay, I can make it seem like this big bad Jedi, who he's already trying to poison Anakin against the Jedi, this is a perfect time for him to make it look like the Jedi are the aggressors and he's the victim.
Mm-hmm.
If he had been doing what he was doing earlier in the fight, which was basically standing his ground, you know, and everything, then it would have looked a little bit more like a Sith going up against a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that I always thought was a little interesting, was the fact that Anakin wasn't questioning the fact that Palpatine had to be stopped and brought in.
No, he didn't want him dead.
Yeah, he didn't want him dead. He thought that there should be, you know, justice and a, you know, like a trial type of a thing.
And that's only because he had an ulterior motive.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean,
because
a lot of people...
because honestly, had he not feared for Padme, you know, and learning how to, you know, if Mace would have been like, you know, we got to get rid of him, Anakin would have been fine because he did it with Dooku.
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't you do, you know? But that's because Dooku wasn't a father figure either, and that's another aspect too.
Mace didn't say, do it.
But also, you know, Palpatine also was like a father figure to Anakin. And so he had a certain amount of, even though he knew like, man, this sucks, he realized still like, man, this still like almost like my dad. You know, I can't just let him kill somebody I care about. And that's always been Anakin's Achilles heel. He had attachments. And that's always been his downfall.
Well, and then not to mention the fact, I look at this too, is the fact that if it had been anybody other than Mace, because Mace has always been kind of the heavy guy.
Stern.
Yeah, stern, you know, like schoolmaster or something, you know, the guy that's always been beating up on Anakin and telling him that he can't, you know, do this or that. And basically, yeah, being the heavy. So it's almost one of those things like, he might not listen to you now because Mace has always been the guy that's been the bad guy to Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Anakin is essentially, he's had a reason to not trust Mace. And the fact that Mace at that point in time is representing the Jedi, you know, I think that plus the father figure thing, plus the fact that he thought that Palpatine held the whole secret to Padme staying alive. Oh, yeah, that definitely played a lot into it.
Yeah. Well, see, it ended up being a very good win anyway.
It was. And I mean, but the thing that I think is the funniest thing in the world, too, is that, you know, he chops off Mace's hands and then he sends him out. And now Anakin's just like, okay, fine. You know, I'll serve you or whatever. And then Palpatine goes the whole, oh, yeah, you know that whole... you know, discovering the secret to...
Yeah, we could find it all together.
We'll find it together.
Like, really?
It'd be like,
So
dude,
you don't know?
right.
So I just did all this for nothing?
Exactly. If I were Anakin, I'd be like, well, wait a second, man. This whole time you were telling me.
Time to turn that blade back on, man. See? You gotta go.
I mean, I just think that was so funny how Palpatine just instantly, like, turned that whole thing around.
You going right out the window with those hands and Mace Windu. That's all.
Exactly. It's like, all right, hold them out.
Yep. What'd you learn? Oh, man. So, what do we have up?
Well, you know what? Since we're talking about Palpatine, this is great because they're from a certain point of view topic.
Ah, yes.
So from a certain point of view, just because we are still a relatively new podcast and we'd been out of commission for a little while.
Yeah, brief hiatus.
Yeah, a little bit of a hiatus. I just want to remind everybody that from a certain point of view is our featured topic discussion. Now, of course, with our show, any topic can be a featured topic. But this is the pre-planned featured topic.
And it's a good one this time.
Oh, yeah, this is really good.
So today is...
Well, this week is...
Well, yeah. That's... It's been a minute.
I know. You got to get back into
the medication, things, man.
There you go. That's it.
But will Palpatine be in episode 9?
I hope so.
Okay.
I really do. And I think, here's the thing. There's been a lot of discussion about, various characters returning, of course. The big one, naturally, is Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been some really interesting talk. I know some of this we could actually break up these 3 things that I'm going to discuss into 3 full-blown feature topics, and I'm talking like they'd be the only thing we discussed. No Cantina, no Duel of Fates, no nothing. We could actually talk about each of these things, because you have the following thing. Will Palpatine be in episode 9?
Right.
Is Snoke actually Darth Plagueis? That's coming back up. And I hope so, because it would perfectly tie the series together. Because the idea is that Darth Plagueis had the key to life. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He knew how to basically raise people from the dead or even not even die. If Snoke were Plagueis, that would actually tie a lot of things together. It would make perfect sense. So that's a rumor that I actually hope is true. The other thing that they were saying is that Luke might not really be dead, because Luke has all these different books, and one of the books that he has, somebody figured this out. He actually, I don't remember if it was in a novel or one of the things, but he actually has Plagueis' book that talks about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he could actually come back in physical form.
Well, speculation. We'll...
This is a big speculation topic.
Wow, I don't even know where to start with this.
I know, there's a lot, man.
Well, I'll start with the original question. Will he be in 9? I think so. I think he will be in some shape or form. I don't think he is going to return in the sense of he's going to be walking around, like he was in Return of the Jedi, because I think he's definitely gone. But I do believe that he left a part of himself here in the sense of, or in the form of a holocron of some sort of...
Yeah, that's what the rumor is. Is it, I think it's Kylo or somebody discovers one of the holocrons, perhaps even on Jakku, because remember, in the Aftermath trilogy, it deals very, very heavily. It deals very heavily with
Jakku.
Also with the Empire and Palpatine's contingency plan.
Right.
So it's a very Palpatine-heavy, series, and it also ties in a little bit with Snoke because it talks about how there was somebody in the outer regions that was
calling to him.
Yeah, calling to him, or the unknown regions, and so there's all these things that could tie together with that. So I'm with you on that one. I think that he is in the form of a holocron. There was also talk of there are Sith ghosts. There was a rumor, or I don't remember if it was a deleted scene or something, concept art, but and I know they dealt with this in a novel too, but there is such a thing as Sith spirits. They're not quite the same as Force ghosts.
Like almost like the witches from...
Yeah, kind of. Well, they had one standing behind the deleted scene or whatever. They had one standing behind Luke on Octo. He was basically, I don't remember what it was. It was some concept art or something. I think for episode 9, actually. And so some have speculated that it could be that. I mean, there's just all this speculation that's out there. So when you tie all this stuff together, what would you like to see happen?
Well,
oh, he's got to get comfortable, folks.
I've been waiting to talk about this for a long time. Long time. Well, here's how I see it. I think that Kylo is going to continue his search for things that pertain to Vader. I think he's still obsessed with Vader. I heard there's something where he finds one of Vader's like prosthetic legs or whatnot. And I think there's like, and we learned in Rebels that, there's all these temples in all these different places where Jedi and Sith have hidden their secrets or treasures of, their knowledge. And I think that what would make the most sense, Rey having the books from that tree that Luke had, and now you have, the sacred texts as Luke called them, and then now you have to match that with Kylo. So I think Kylo is going to go out and he's going to find, I think he's going to go to Mustafar. I think he's going to find something that Vader had, some recordings, some things that that helped him draw upon the dark side, the pain that he had. And I don't think that that's one thing I think that Kylo doesn't even realize is that how much Palpatine, or what Palpatine really did to Vader. Because not only did he turn him emotionally, but even physically with the suit. He made the suit painful for Vader because he knew pain would enrage him and that would make his power stronger. And so all these little nuances and things like that, I think Kylo is going to take within himself. And he's like, okay, Snoke is no longer here to chastise me, but the person that made the person that I idolize, I need to seek his information. And so I think that's what sends him on this quest to find, because Rey had Luke. So, and he knows what Luke can do and what he's all about. So I think he needs to find something that matches that. And I think that's where he's going to seek out Vader's information, Palpatine's information. And then now it depends on what he's going to do with it. Personally, I don't think he's going to revive the Sith. I don't think he's going to do the whole rule of two thing. I honestly think that he's going to bring the Knights of Ren into, and that's where we see them. And that's why we, even on the last podcast, we were talking about, should they make episode 9 2 parts? Because I think that's a good time. Now you can have one of those big wars where now you have the Knights of Ren versus the new Jedi Order, or whatever Rey calls them, the Avengers, I don't know. But
the Knights of Rey.
Right. Ray of Light, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's where we're headed. And I think Rey is going to have guidance from Luke and Yoda. And I think Kylo's going to hear from Palpatine. And I think that's where everything, because I don't think that Kylo's ever going to be redeemed. I mean, some people think that it's going to happen. I think that would be cliche. I really don't want to see him redeemed. I want to see him as the bad guy and leave it that way.
Well, there's only one way that I would buy into that.
Okay.
And that is if they did the whole thing, which I think would, if he were just redeemed, that would be, basically repeating the first trilogy. But if they had a thing to where he was being redeemed and then Rey ended up going to the dark side, and now the situation's reversed, and him being there, now he's saying, no, this isn't the way to, that would actually add some drama that we haven't really seen before.
The other thought is that, and this is still speculation, but the other thought that's out there is that in the midst, because there's a theory, because Darth Plagueis could create life. He created Vader. Palpatine had something to do with that. And I think that's why he...
Yeah, that's what they were saying, is that Palpatine is the one that actually created Anakin.
Basically. And then now, but what if he did that with Rey?
Yeah, I mean,
And then now Rey is the daughter of Palpatine, if you will. And then now, now you have Kylo trying to use that against Rey.
Yeah, well, there's actually that was one of the other rumors that they were using to try to prove that Snoke is Plagueis, is that he basically created Rey.
And I don't know if he's Plagueis.
I hope he is, because I remember when that rumor first was hitting back when Force Awakens came out. I actually thought that would really make sense, because if you talk about tying the trilogy together, Plagueis actually is pretty much a prominent figure, even though he's not featured in the, prequels in the original trilogy. In fact, the only time he's even mentioned is Revenge of the Sith. But, when you stop and think of what he's responsible for, he's Palpatine's master.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that actually legitimately knew how to create life, cheat death, all this other stuff. And that knowledge is what Palpatine used to put Anakin in motion. Literally, it changed the whole universe.
So
if Plagueis comes back, it would also make sense, too, because if he actually did, find a way to cheat death himself, and he just was sort of off on the sidelines watching what Palpatine was doing, and then once he was destroyed, he stepped in. There's a lot of ways that it could make sense. Yeah,
but and even in that, though, you're kind of still violating the Sith ruler, too, because now you would have had 3 Sith walking around.
Well, that's only because Palpatine was, you got to remember that they basically, that whole thing happens where the apprentice basically kills the master, and the master knows that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they encourage it, and their whole thing is, well, if my apprentice defeats me, then I deserve to die.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about it is something that's in the new canon, although they haven't, I don't know to what extent they're actually playing with this, but we actually did not know at first that that Sith could live on after they died. We know about Jedi and Force ghosts, but it was always understood that one of the downsides of the dark side of the Force is when you're destroyed, you're destroyed. Mm-hmm. But now with these Sith spirits, it almost seems to, okay, there's something different going on, because another rumor that's being very strongly put forward is that Anakin or Vader's going to make an appearance talking to Luke.
Well, you also have to think about it, too. Like, you have all these different places, like in Empire on Dagobah, there's the little cave that has a strong dark side presence.
Mm-hmm.
In Last Jedi, same thing. You had a little cavern where Rey was when she was trying to find her parents. So how are these places just inhabited with the dark side? So I'm just thinking that...
Yeah, well,
I'm just thinking that there's got to be some...
Yeah, there was an explanation.
Or something like that, because why would... I mean, yeah, you can make the argument because you did have a Force tree, but that was just a tree that just, to my knowledge, just, amplified the Force. Didn't give a light or dark.
No.
It was just the Force, period. However, but the places, if it had a dark side presence, what is in that? What's making that a dark?
Generating
exactly,
basically.
What's generating that? And I think that's where you're starting to get those Sith spirits, if that's what you're talking about.
I don't know.
That could be. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I know you didn't write the manual on it, but I'm just saying,
that I'm talking about. Wait a second, I didn't.
But I think that's just something that you can, and that's what I mean. Like when you have all these different temples and these different places that have the holocrons and the tablets and secrets of each of these of each side of the Force. And of course you're scattering them around the galaxy because you don't want your opponent to know where your secrets are and vice versa. So I just think that Kylo's got to go searching for his answers because he's the one now, like I said before, he's the one who's still lost. At least Luke started Rey on a path. And granted, Kylo did too, but his was kind of like really, he was just more so.
He's always been kind of sketchy.
Yeah, he's been just kind of used as a henchman more or less than anything than a path. Whereas like now.
Well, in a way. I mean, Snoke did say that he was trying to make him the new Vader.
Yeah, but I think that was just a tease. I think that was just something to, once again, just to keep him on a leash and just to tick him off.
Well, I mean, here's another thing to look at too. Actually, a couple things. One is that I think you're on the right path, so to speak. Because one of the things that I noticed about The Last Jedi was in The Force Awakens, he was really obsessed with Vader, Kylo.
Mm-hmm.
Kylo wanted, he wanted to carry on his grandfather's legacy. He was obsessed with all things Vader.
Yep.
That seemed to disappear in The Last Jedi. Now, of course, the explanation that Rian Johnson basically gave in the movie was that he was like, you know what, let the past just die.
Right. Screw it.
Yeah.
Let's just do
basically, it's just like, I'm done. But I don't necessarily think that that's something that would have, especially when you have, and there are certain things that, like when he saw Finn fighting with the lightsaber that actually belonged to Anakin Skywalker. It's like, hey, that belongs to me or whatever. There's some rumors or concept art or something floating around. I don't know. I've read so much stuff about Episode 9 in the last 3 days. It's crazy. Pretty much, I guess he has a whole bunch of lightsabers that he's collected. Because there's some concept art that leaked, or actually it might even be photos, where Kylo has a green lightsaber. So, there might be, and, in the Aftermath trilogy, they actually had these disciples of Vader almost that they actually
had. Acolytes,
yeah, the acolytes, they actually had his red lightsaber and they were trying to sell it or something.
Right.
So you have all these things, and then the other thing I was going to bring up, too, I've been playing Battlefront 2 a lot. I mean, I love it. If you guys haven't checked out Battlefront 2, it's a big improvement over the first one. And this one actually has a story mode. The story mode's incredible. And the thing about the story mode that's interesting is that Luke was actually, in one of the scenes, and you play Luke for a while, he was actually looking for this compass or something, and it was going to point him to some, I forgot what it was, but it could actually be used in Episode 9. It could be used in a lot of things. They're really trying to tie the canon together, and they're doing it in such a way where it's kind of like you said, they're really focusing a lot on these artifacts, holocrons. I mean, you're seeing this popping up in Rebels,
right?
The novels. You're seeing a lot of talk about all this stuff that it's got to be in 9.
Yeah, I mean, because and that's what I mean, like when I say there's a lot of stuff they have to cover because there's so much, like I said, there's so much that Kylo has to learn because that's one of the things that he was saying to Snoke, like, with more of your teaching, like I can be better, I can be strong. He's constantly trying to find the knowledge, but he kind of feels stonewalled. Well, now there's no one in his way. Now he's free to go and do whatever he wants. And so now he can go find all the stuff from Vader, from Mustafar. He can find the stuff from Palpatine, and he could put all that information together, figure out what he wants to do with it, and then he could be like the ultimate bad guy.
Well, I mean, I think I think what ultimately has to happen, and I think with our speculation, we could probably agree on the fact that they have to answer who Snoke was, because you really have to figure out where he fits in this whole puzzle.
Yeah, because Leia and Han knew who he was.
Yeah, everybody knows who he is, but they could know who he is because he's the First Order guy. Although it is true that they're talking about that, oh yeah, Snoke was the one that influenced them, and so they probably know he's got something to do with the Force.
Right.
You know, and it just seems like they have to use Palpatine. I think he's definitely going to be in 9. It's probably going to be in the form of, you know, a hologram in these holocrons or something. Because yeah, they have to use these things to tie a lot of the loose ends and to further the story a little bit, particularly like you said, where Kylo's going, because he right now doesn't really have a definitive direction. He's trying to figure out what it is he really wants to do. You know, it's just JJ's got a lot of work ahead of him. Yeah. I do not envy him in this.
Not at all. And that brain trust has got, because they once again, they all have to figure out how this stuff is going to make sense. And that's the biggest thing that the fans are going to judge. It's like, okay, is it entertaining? Does it make sense? But I just had a thought. It just occurred to me. Okay, so Leia and Han send their only son to train with Luke to be a Jedi. Luke sees a lot of dark in him, and he tries to stop it. Now, Leia and Han both know about Snoke. Why doesn't that concern Luke? Like, why is he just content with, like, letting this, like, you allowed this guy, like this darkness entered your nephew. That should have been a concern right there. Like, okay, where did this even come from? And granted, it could just be, you know, a genetic thing. Like, you know, y'all got bad apples in the family or something like that. So he could have been that one bad apple. But then once you find out that Snoke is this guy who seduced your family into the dark side, like, wouldn't you want to kind of like investigate that and kind of figure out,
yeah,
like,
I mean,
who is this guy? Like, you're just not going to just
spending your time with, yeah,
like you're just not just going to let him run off with like the creepy old man in the robe, like Herbert from like Family Guy.
I was just thinking about that too.
Like, that's just kind of crazy to me. Like, Luke, what are you doing?
Well, sometimes I wonder too if they even really knew. I mean, because you got to remember that he could have started taking up with Snoke after all that stuff with the Jedi Academy thing went down. You know, I mean, that might have been, Snoke might have found him after that. It's true, though. He could have found him before. I'm not actually sure. It is interesting, though, because the thing is that, yeah, they're aware of him, but it's like, okay, wouldn't you at some point try to stop him from having anything to do with him? But
especially if you know how powerful what your bloodline is capable of.
Well, it also depends on if they really know who Snoke was. Like, for instance, people could have, before the prequels, people could have said the same thing about Palpatine. But then you find out, oh, well, wait a minute. He was kindly old Emperor Palpatine. You know, nobody really knew that he was any kind of a threat, so we wouldn't limit any time. If Snoke actually appeared to be somebody who was not very evil and you found out after the fact, so then you're saying, oh, yeah, well, Snoke got to him or whatever. Well, maybe at the time he wasn't, you know, he didn't appear to be that evil. We don't know because we don't know who Snoke is.
That's true.
I mean, that's the problem.
That's a good point.
That's why I think it was a mistake. The only thing I will say about The Last Jedi that I think was really a lost opportunity was they really needed to, even if they didn't reveal everything about Snoke, you needed to further his
story, his involvement.
His story and his involvement along a little bit. We needed a little bit more information, you know, because the thing is, and this is why I'm so glad now that Colin Trevorrow was dismissed from episode 9, because I can't even imagine at this point anybody but JJ, the guy that started this thing,
wrapping it up.
to really wrap this up and to wrap it up correctly.
Because, I'm just thinking about it too. Like, everybody knew about Snoke. Because
everybody's throwing his name around.
Yeah, even DJ, he's like, oh yeah, I can get you into Snoke's little boudoir. Like,
yeah.
I mean, everybody knows, like, and he's got his own flagship. I mean, everybody knows what the ship looks like. I mean, it's like, how do you let this guy just walk around? Like, that's what I'm just mystified by that. But like you said, we don't know who he is or what he's.
Or they might not have thought he was like, look, everybody knew who Hitler was too, but there's only a handful of people or countries that really knew the extent of what he was doing.
Yeah, how crazy.
And how crazy and how devastating it was and how everybody else was next. I mean, even the United States for a long time, they didn't agree with a lot of his policies and stuff, but quite frankly, it wasn't affecting this country, so nobody really did a whole lot to stop him. And it could have been the same thing with Snoke. People didn't really know what Snoke was truly doing, and it could have been. Because don't forget, people didn't know that Palpatine was a Sith or a Force user.
Well, true.
He hid that.
Yeah.
And in fact, he started propping up Vader to be more that. Mm-hmm. And he was just the Emperor that was controlling him. Now, of course, you and I have said, I think on our very first podcast, you got to wonder. It's like if you're looking at Vader and how powerful he is walking around, it's like, well, why is he listening to the Emperor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like he's walking around choking people left and right.
Yeah, he's got this like power. He's got this lightsaber. It's kind of like, okay, well, this guy should be able to take out Palpatine.
Right.
But Palpatine went to great lengths to hide his Sithness, for lack of a better term. And Snoke could have been doing the same thing.
Very true. Very true.
Well, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, this is going to probably be a more in-depth discussion.
And I'm
it's
sure
going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and I mean, probably the week before Episode 9 comes out, we're still going to be... The only difference is we'll stop calling it Episode 9 and we'll actually know what the name of the movie is.
Right.
So you know what? We brought up and we've actually choked you guys out, no pun intended, with a lot of information. So now it's time to clear your mind. That's right. This is our question and answer period where you guys send us a bunch of questions and we answer them here on the podcast. And as promised, we're going to start taking a lot of questions from Quora.com, which is where a lot of people are actually asking us these questions. And if you guys are listening, send them to our Twitter page. We're right there. We're at Head to Head SW. So, hit us up on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, same thing, hit us up. So our first question is what?
What movie should Lucasfilm have made instead of Solo? This comes from Matthew Donnellon from Quora.
All right. I honestly think it should have been the Obi-Wan movie.
Okay. I would say if you're going to do a movie, I think you should have done one with Vader, like either the Rise of Vader or the whole Lords of the Sith thing. Because one, I think that would have people would have just come out in droves just because they know it's Vader. And I think because of the success, and everybody loves that iconic scene at the end of Rogue One, where Vader just has this melee in that whole little corridor. I think people would have really loved to see, like, okay, the other side of Vader, like, now that he's in the suit. Like, hey, let's see how he's sitting in his chambers thinking about Padme. Let's see how the Emperor is still poisoning his mind. Let's see if how he's handling everything, how he's getting used to the suit, and then trying to still go out and do the Jedi purge, and he's still going out. Like, I think that would have been like basically the things that we've seen in the comics and things like that whole situation with Tarkin. I think that would have been great because then you really get to understand the full extent of Vader. And I think that would make him even more lovable, even though he's weird because he's kind of like an anti-hero because at his core, he really wanted to be good. It's just he made poor decisions that led him to a point.
I know, he's like the total after-school special guy.
Yeah, and it's just like, it just that wrong bad turn. Like, he had that one bad day that just led him down this whole life of peril. And I think that if people got to see that side, because, yeah, we know him from, the original trilogy is this menacing guy who's force choking like all his employees and, he's making sarcastic remarks. But then you kind of saw in the prequel how he got turned. Yeah, but then now the remorse that he kind of has, but then now he still has to go out and do this job that he probably really doesn't want to do, but he knows he has no choice at this point.
Well, he's not. I mean, there is a little bit of that, but, as somebody who read Lord of the Sith, I mean, he's still pretty much a dark side guy. The difference is he just hates Palpatine for what he did to him. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the suit inflicting pain to enrage him to make him more powerful. That was all purposeful. And that's true. The only thing is, as much as I would love to see that, because Lords of the Sith, I would love to see that made into a book. It really shows you the relationship. Yeah, it was a book. It really showed you the relationship between Palpatine and Vader, the early days, the way they interact. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really interesting story. But the problem is that from a business or commercial standpoint, you run the risk of you're relying too much on Vader. And we've already seen that. And you almost get, I mean, people would like it, and it probably would have done more commercially well, but the Obi-Wan movie is something that people were actually wanting to see. That's the difference. Everybody started getting really excited. A director and a writer were announced. Ewan McGregor expressed interest that he was going to sign on. The Star Wars fandom actually was clamoring for the movie, and it's from a business standpoint, if you have your fan base saying, hey, this is a movie we want, that should probably be the movie you make.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can go in a lot of different directions, and that's something you're really not too familiar with, and you know what, you can have Vader in that movie.
Oh yeah.
You could easily have him in that movie and it would fit okay. I mean, obviously there's some people that said, "Oh yeah, they can face off again." But you would have to really retcon that to make that work.
Or you could combine the two.
Well, yeah, you could.
Like almost, I don't want to call it The Purge because there's always a franchise called that. But basically, if you just chronicle that period of time where Vader is going out and purging, but like Obi-Wan is trying to save as many Jedi as he can and try to get them away from...
Or you spend like half the movie you're showing, Vader doing the purge, but then you flash over to Tatooine and see... Okay, he sees the effects of this, so now you could do that.
He feels responsible. Okay, well, maybe I need to go out and covertly do some things to kind of get Vader away from all the other Jedi so they have time to get away and do things, because I know how he thinks, so I've known him for so long, so I kind of know what to do and how to stay away from him and cloak myself from him.
Right, because all the while you can't compromise Luke.
Right.
And where you are. So it's like find a way to save everybody, but without necessarily revealing where I am or even that it's me.
Yeah. I mean, it was just funny because like I was reading the Vader comic, and it was basically saying that, Vader wanted a world to himself. And so he was asking like, well, yeah, Palpatine said, yeah, I'll give you one, one that's going to cause you rage and, that's going to basically fuel your dark side. So he was like, Naboo, Tatooine. And he was just like, nah. And I was just thinking, like, what if he would have picked Tatooine,
Well,
because that was a big source. That was his initial source of pain.
That was another one of my favorite comic issues, by the way.
Yeah, but then when he said, no, Mustafar, because that was the moment, like, okay, he felt like the ultimate betrayal at that point, and that's where he had the most pain. So, and I always wonder, like, why did he go back to Mustafar? But now that makes sense now.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah.
Well, and, for that matter, I mean, if I had to give an honorable mention, now this is supposed to be a Clone Wars episode, actually, but they turn it into a novel, and that's Dark Disciple. I would have liked to have seen that movie. Really, there's a lot of movies I would have liked to have seen over Solo, and that's not because I have a negative impression of Solo or anything like that. First of all, everybody knows that Han Solo is probably my favorite character next to Darth Vader. But at the same time, I just didn't feel like we really needed a Han Solo origin story. I really didn't. I mean, it's not so much that the character didn't interest me. This is where I actually disagree with Harrison Ford. I know that Harrison Ford's whole reason for wanting Han Solo to die was because he thought that him going in a sacrifice would have actually made sense for the character, which is true. But his other problem was he just didn't find him to be that interesting of a character to play. He just didn't really think there was a whole lot of dimensions to him, but there are. And I should say, I neglected to mention this at the beginning, but, I don't know if I even brought this up in the last podcast. I think I did, where I finished The Last Shot.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the effects that happened to me after I finished that book was I really, truly understood what depth the characters of Lando and Han really have. I mean, there's a lot of things that Han's struggling with, particularly during that time period, that are really interesting, and even from an acting standpoint. So the problem, though, is that a Han Solo movie would have been good if you talked about after the events of Return of the Jedi. The Han Solo movie before, I don't know, I think we already knew everything that we needed to know about him from A New Hope. It's sort of like his... I mean, I would have actually preferred... I'll tell you what I would have liked. Is if they had done a movie about the relationship between Han and Lando, the early years and adventures that they had to go on, and how they would sort of, they had that frenemy thing happen where they would kind of half betray each other, but then half bail each other out.
Mm-hmm.
There could have been a lot of really great material there, but a straight up origin story like we got. And I actually enjoyed the Solo movie, but I just don't think we needed that.
Right. I agree.
Whereas an Obi-Wan movie, Vader movie, Dark Disciple, anything, Bloodline, Lost Stars.
The list goes on.
Yeah, I mean, or a Thrawn movie.
Yeah.
Give me a Thrawn movie. These are the things that I think that they should have done, and this is where I think that they've been a little bit lost as far as, except for Rogue One. I thought that was a genius move. Hey, let's show how they stole the Death Star plans, because that was a really big moment in Star Wars history.
Mm-hmm.
Great idea. So, Matthew, that's pretty much what I think that we think about that one. Those are like, but many movies we thought that they should have made instead of Solo. What do we got next? Hey, it's another Matthew.
Well,
if only
Matthew writes.
A different one, by the way.
Yes. Matthew Culberson writes, what had to happen in order for Anakin not to go to the dark side in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith?
What had to happen in order for Anakin not to go to the dark side in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith?
Well, if you're talking about Revenge of the Sith specifically...
Well, I don't think that... From the tone of the question, I don't think that's what he's... I know that's what it says. I know that's what he wrote. But let's remember that Revenge of the Sith is where he actually turned.
Right.
That's not necessarily... There were a lot of events leading up to that, though. So
indeed. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if we were talking about just Revenge of the Sith, I would say ultimately not going to the palace where Mace told him to stay there, but he went anyway. But I think ultimately was getting into a relationship with Padme.
Yeah. Well, you can also say ultimately that it was getting into a mentor relationship with Palpatine.
Yeah, but I think ultimately, I don't think Palpatine would have had that type of... I think he still probably would have found a way of it because he's Palpatine. But
well, especially if the theory is true that he essentially is responsible for creating Anakin, he created him for a reason. He wasn't going to let that go.
Right. However, I think that ultimately what led Anakin down that path was his attachments. And that's always been his downfall. And that's what the Jedi were always trying to, warn him about, is like, be careful of your attachments. And that's even with Luke, talking about Rey. That's even Vader revealed it in Return of the Jedi with Luke, when it's like, your feelings for your friends are strong, especially for, then he said, sister. So your feelings have betrayed them too. So I think that's basically the downfall of any Jedi, and that's why they tell you don't have those attachments, is because...
No different than real life. I mean, they tell, government agents... Yeah. I mean, you're better off if you don't have a family, because it's something that can't be used as leverage against you.
Exactly. And that same thing with, that's why they didn't want women in the military for so long, is because they felt like men would naturally, because women being the softer sex, they felt like, okay, well, if a woman was captured,
good move. Get all the SJWs on us. Yeah, we're gonna get some listeners now.
But I mean, don't get me wrong. Our women in armed services are doing an exceptional job, and that they can do everything. They've proven that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that as men, we're naturally inclined to protect a woman. So if you don't have that next to you, you don't have to worry about, and it's not necessarily a romantic thing. It's just simply just as chivalry. A human being. Yeah, chivalry as a human being, as a man. So I think that the biggest fall for Anakin overall was his attachment, because he had an attachment to his mother. And we saw what happened with that. He went and slaughtered a bunch of sand people because he wasn't there. He wasn't strong enough to save her. And yeah, he could have gotten over that. But then now he has a wife who is, also pregnant, and that he's hiding in secret. And, he's trying to live this life as a general in the Clone Army. And then he's also a Jedi Knight. And then he's trying to deal with that balance of everything.
I just thought of something. I mean, this is actually a good point, because when you talked about the sand people, I actually thought about something I've never thought of before in all of Star Wars, but this conversation just put this thought in my head, and that is...
You want a sand person action figure?
I do. I have one. I had one. I mean, yeah, the sand people didn't really elicit a whole lot of sympathy just because of the way that they acted pretty much in the original trilogy, or even taking pot shots at the pod racers.
I know.
I actually think a lot of people were like, yeah, seeing them cut down and pretty much in a weekend. I know I was. Just because they're always, the guys that are attacking everybody.
They're just jerks.
Yeah, pretty much. It was fun to watch them, against this guy that they had no hope of beating.
Nope.
But here's the thing that was interesting, is the fact that, so we, of course, don't get to see what happened to Anakin between the time of Episode 1 and Episode 2. Palpatine, from the time he was a kid, was probably influencing him to be more emotional. That's why he lost it with the Sand People. If you stop and think about it, when we see him in Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan's obviously trying to calm him down, make him think about things, warn him against things. And at first, you almost, if you're not really thinking about it, you just think that, okay, he's just naturally this, emotional, keyed up kid. But what if the whole time that Palpatine was with him, he was encouraging that behavior?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good possibility.
Sure, think about it. If he's the one, I would especially say this is true if he's the one that really was responsible for creating him. He's going to try to cultivate that, into, and really mold him and make him what he wants. That's the whole reason why he would have done it.
Well, I mean, he did say at the end of episode 1, we will watch your career with great interest. So, I mean, I think that
it just depends on when he got, because we don't really know. I don't even know if I read any novels to that effect, but we don't really know when Palpatine really started more or less like mentoring him.
Right.
You know, so I mean, you bring up a good point when you're kind of like, well, honestly, it's like, okay, if you're talking about Revenge of the Sith, that's one thing, but really? This kid didn't really have a chance.
Doomed from the beginning.
I mean, he was going to be encouraged. He was manipulated. He was emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, but if you look at it, yeah, you're right. If he just had stayed at the Jedi Temple,
yep.
You know, when Mace said, listen, just wait here, we got this.
Mm-hmm.
Mace probably would have still had his hands.
Yep.
The other thing that could have kept him from going is if Mace just didn't stop and listen to Anakin's protests.
Yeah.
If he had just, you know, defeated Palpatine, just killed him. I don't think that would have happened because I think, like I said, you know, I think that Palpatine was theater for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if he actually felt like he was going to, you know, he probably would have just.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really a good question. Like, could Mace really actually beat Palpatine?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think so. But there's just no way. Palpatine was the most powerful dark side user. So if you make the argument that, oh, you know, because some people have said that, well, Mace actually had some dark side with him. It's like, okay, and, you know, I mean, the only person that could have beat Palpatine would have been Anakin. Yoda had maybe, if things had been a little bit more equal. But Yoda, if we say that Yoda was more powerful than Mace.
Well, I mean, yeah. But then, you ever wonder, like, who made Yoda a Grandmaster?
Yeah, you're like, well, there was another.
Like, because somebody would have had to have, like, bestowed that title upon him. So it's kind of like.
Well, there have been other Grandmasters. There haven't been a whole lot of them. There was another guy. And it's like we always do this, too. We always get into these discussions where I can't remember these people that I had once read about or something. This is why I should really read up on these things more when we do these podcasts. But there was somebody that had appointed Yoda that. And it's like you naturally just rise through it. It's, you know, no different than when they bestow upon you the rank of master.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's when you achieve a certain thing. Now, what's interesting is that where that question really becomes fascinating to me is like, okay, can there only be one Grandmaster? Like, let's just say Mace did whatever you have to do to become a Grandmaster.
Mm-hmm.
But is it a thing where as long as Yoda's still around, he can't achieve that? Or
no, I don't think that would probably.
You know, or does he just, I don't think so either. Because so what that shows, though, is that nobody else was powerful enough or could do the things that they needed to do to achieve that rank. So it's kind of like.
Do we know that Mace Windu was never a Grandmaster?
Yeah.
How do we know?
You can even, well, here.
Well, I mean, because the only reason why I say that is because, like, everybody, like, when they call Yoda, they call him Master Yoda.
Well,
they never say Grandmaster Yoda. Just like they say Master Windu. So,
well, they
really don't make that distinction. But the only reason why I say Mace probably may have beaten Palpatine is because Mace is really strong in the light side. So, of course, he sits only second to Yoda, which we don't know how far off that is. We don't know, like, how much more powerful Yoda is than Mace. But the fact that he can use that and the dark side, which I'm sure Yoda could, too, if he wanted to. But
yeah, I mean.
I'm sure, but I'm just saying, like, I think I don't know. And then that stands to reason. Like, okay, granted, Sidious was the most powerful dark side user, but does that make him a grandmaster of the Sith, or is he?
Well, he's been said to be the most powerful. The only one. Oh man, I really have to reach into this. The only one who I think might have been more powerful than him was Bane, possibly Exar Kun. But I think he's thought of to be the most powerful dark side user ever. And that's basically it. And I mean, as far as like where all that stuff, I mean, Lucas himself basically is the one that said Yoda was a grandmaster and he's the most powerful guy. You know, and it stands to reason, because think about it. Yoda was like 800 and some years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had a lot of time to study.
True.
You know, I mean, Mace really wasn't that old. You know, yeah, he's powerful, but he's not Yoda powerful. I mean, all the things that, you know, Yoda could do, even beyond what we see in the movies, you know, because there's a lot of things that even in new canon, stuff like that, they haven't really touched upon Yoda too much in the new canon. But, you know, people are well aware and fear him. Even Palpatine, to a point, feared him. And like I said, look at what he did to Palpatine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are the things that are kind of interesting, because that's why we love questions like this, because look at all the discussion that it sparked.
I know.
Good job, Matthew Culbertson. So if you guys have any other questions for us, hit us up on, you know, on Twitter, on Facebook, Head to Head SW Podcast. And you can also go to our website, headtoheadswpodcast.com. You can email us, Star Wars at headtoheadswpodcast.com. You know, we'd love to hear from you guys. We love interacting with everybody. We absolutely adore talking to other fans about everything.
It's truly our honor and pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's going to wrap up this episode.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I'm Eric Vancil.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.